Welcome to the Mullin It Over podcast with Reverend Jack Mullins and Austin Covey.
I remember one time a number of years ago, I had a young woman, grew up through the church, through youth group, and her mother was my secretary. Sweet young lady. And when she was about 28, her husband, who was an oil field worker, was coming home at the end of a week on site. On the way home, he had a traffic accident and was killed in the accident. She was devastated. She didn't know what she was going to do. She was out in Midland, Texas, alone by herself. Her world had come crashing down around her. All of her hopes and dreams were dashed. And she came to me, I don't know, 3 or 4 years later, kind of out of the blue, and told me about it. Of course, I knew, but this was the first time I'd spoken to her. And she said, "Am I wrong to blame God? How do I get over this? Is there something wrong with me? Why am I still angry with my husband? Why am I still angry? Why am I angry with God?" Have you ever run across a situation like that?
I have heard. I see that repeated. I think the undercurrent there is one that you do see a lot. That's, why does God let bad things happen to good people? That's a very. I'm reducing it down, but that's a very common sort of theme that you see, particularly from people who maybe aren't religious or who were and have left. I guess I would distinguish that between people who are. There's a difference between people who are atheist and people who believe that God exists but are angry with God. Whereas an atheist doesn't believe in a God, right? That's the name, atheist. Anywho, so I do think there's a lot of people who may identify as atheists. In reality, is they believe there might be some God, but they're just not happy with it, or they think, well, a good God could not allow these things, therefore there must not be a God.
Right.
Or God is not good, right? Or all good.
And I think you're exactly right. I think part of it is, years ago, a rabbi by the name of Harold Kushner wrote a book, "Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People?" And then parenthetically, "Why Do Good Things Happen to Bad People?"
Right.
And
people don't ever talk about that side of it.
No. And I think this young lady was coming from the perspective, I'm a good person. I've lived a good life, and I grew up in the church. What did I do for God to allow this to happen to me? And, we were at Chili's. We were eating lunch after church. And the first thing I said to her, first of all, I'm sorry, Steph. I'm sorry you've had to go through that. I've not lost anyone like that. My father died. I went through a lot of grief with that. Took a long time. I just gave her permission to be angry. I said, God is big enough to carry your anger. That's okay. You can be angry. It's natural to be angry at your husband.
That's one of the steps of
grief.
Right.
And part of the trick is to not get trapped in that, but to allow yourself to move on without allowing anyone else to push you to move on.
Right.
Because I see that a lot. You ought to be over. You ought to be farther along. It's time for you to get over this. And I'm not advocating turning around and slapping them.
I might be tempted to.
But it's reasonable to be tempted because it is your pain, it is your grief. You live yourself through it at your rate, as long as you are continuing to progress.
That's what I liked what you said about live yourself through it. there are steps to the grieving process. It's fine it is fine and maybe necessary to experience all of them.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck on any of
And
them.
they are not sequential.
Yes. When there's no prescribed time frame to them.
That's right.
You could go through 6 of the steps real fast, and 7 could be,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that one takes a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. When my father died, he died after a lengthy illness with emphysema. And I guess 3 years after he had passed away, and he was in ICU at Baylor on a respirator. And I realized I was not able to visit anyone from the church that happened to be in the hospital on a respirator. I could not make myself do it.
Like a PTSD kind of a
Exactly.
response? Yeah.
And I sat down with a clergy friend of mine, and he talked me through some of my guilt connected with my father's death. But he said, how long's it been? I said, it's been a while. He said, tell me about that first year. And I said, well, one thing I noticed was that every time there was an event, be it Christmas, whatever the event was, and I got on the other side of it, I kind of had a sense of relief because, okay, I made it through that one.
Right.
And at the end of the first year, I had gone through a complete cycle and survived it. And that's what I told her. I said, every time you go through one of these life events that y'all had always shared and you cannot any longer, embrace and celebrate your survival, that you got through it. And just because you get through it does not diminish the memories or the love, but it can soften the pain.
Right. And I think, to me, this question, too, ends up at kind of when we talk about why does God allow bad things to happen to good people, it's kind of an interesting thing because from a certain standpoint, I don't know that God is that heavily involved. As long as we are mortal, as long as we have self-determination, things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I think sometimes I'm certainly guilty of this. We kind of ride the line of, it's like if something good happens, it's like, man, I'm blessed. But then when something bad happens, I don't want to say, well, I got unblessed.
I'm cursed.
Yeah. So it's like when something bad happens, it's like, well, God doesn't pay that much attention. And then when something good happens, it's like God's blessing you. It's like, well, you pick one, you can't. I do think we tend to ride both sides of that fence a little bit. I certainly do.
And something that I think we don't like to think about when we do our own theology, and all theology is how we think about and talk about God. And we forget sometimes that there are moments in our existence when stuff happens. That's not the popular phrasing of that, but for this moment, stuff happens.
Yeah, insert other word, if you know
and
what I mean.
Be it natural disasters or anything else. That is the movement of existence and creation. Just like sometimes, like I said, good things happen. And what may be good for one person may be bad for another. My dad was in the hospital. Minister came in to see him. Now, my dad was not... This minister really, my dad liked him and appreciated him, but he wasn't his favorite minister. And his minister said at the end of the visit, well, Jack, can I have a prayer with you? And my dad looked up at him and said, yeah, I don't think so. Excuse me? You may not pray for what I think I need. What do you mean by that? Okay, Sunday, you prayed for rain. My dad was a home builder. On Monday, I was pouring a slab. I did not need it to rain. But you prayed for rain. Your prayer was in contradiction to what I needed.
Right.
So I'll pray for what I perceive I need. And you pray for what you perceive is needed. For example, my dad was silently and privately praying for a release from his illness in whatever form that took, be it physical healing or a terminal healing. But at that point, he didn't care. He just, I got to get out of this situation one way or the other.
Well, I said that about, there's another situation that I know of. It's a guy that has a brain tumor, and I said I think it's harder on the family than it is on the person, because either you're going to be healed from treatment, or you're either going to find peace and healing from treatment, or you're going to find peace in death.
Yeah.
But the families, the family might find peace and healing, but if you pass, they don't have that same peace.
No.
Now they have, to a certain extent, chaos.
Exactly. And I was chatting with a friend recently who said, I'm prepared intellectually. And I understand that is the best outcome for my loved one. But emotionally, I'm not there. I said, and you probably won't be until you truly go through grief.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever are.
No, you cannot prepare emotionally.
Ahead of time.
You
can recover, but I don't know that you can prepare for that.
Yeah, because you've not experienced the loss. You have anticipated the loss. But on the flip side, it's like having a child. You can plan for, you can get everything set up. You can anticipate the joy of having the child. But until you've experienced it, it's not real. And you really cannot anticipate what that moment is going to be like.
I think it's true for anything, though. It's like education on any topic, and I would say these are all becoming educated. Right? You are learning through experience. You can only learn so much through through a classroom style. Like you can mentally prepare yourself for it, but it's a whole different thing when it's actually. You can read all the books. It's different when you're dealing with it.
Yeah, you can read every book on parenting you want to, but it still doesn't prepare you for the shock of when you have to change that first dirty diaper.
The first blowout.
Yeah. You can't prepare for that.
No, that's a learning experience.
Yeah. Unless you've worked in a feed lot, there's nothing to prepare you for that.
Daycare, maybe.
Yeah, daycare.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Back to the question, though, and I know we've kind of end laughing, and I don't mean to make light of the situation because it's not. I do think that's a place you have to get to mentally, though, where you just accept, maybe rightly or wrongly, I don't know, that life happens. I don't know that God is dialed into every moment of life happening. I think if God were dialed into every moment of life happening, we wouldn't have self-determination. So,
well, God can be dialed in without manipulating.
When I say dialed in, I mean I don't think it's a big chess game.
No, no.
And I think you have to get to that point, because if you believe that we have self-determination, then you have to also understand there are going to be consequences, positive and negative, to that self-determination.
Absolutely. And we sit here and we make these comments understanding that there may be those listening and watching for whom their theology of God is, we are but chess pieces in God's chess game, and that God is directly involved and engaged in it all. And I understand that. I can appreciate it intellectually. I can't embrace it. That's not my personal theology.
Well, like I said a minute ago, I think it's easier to embrace that when positive things happen.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to say, well, I got, I've been blessed. God was looking out for me.
Yeah.
And I can honestly say sometimes it's hard not to say that if certain things. I used to have a professor in college. It was an environmental studies professor who would not say anything was true or false. He would say the preponderance of the evidence suggests.
Yeah.
And I think, things can break in your way one time or two times, and you say, oh, I got lucky. But things can break in your way a certain number of times to which you have to nobody has to do anything, but I think it's fair and reasonable to say the preponderance of the evidence suggests there's something maybe greater than luck that has.
Yeah. And perhaps part of that might be you're living your life in such a way by virtue of your faith and opening yourself up to the direction of God that makes you in a position to be more inclined to experience positivities in your life. Now, one thing that this girl did, for whatever reason, she and her husband had put sperm on ice. And so after she had processed the loss for a couple of years and been through some counseling, she went down and had in vitro fertilization with his sperm. She was able to fulfill that part of their common dreams and to have his baby and to raise their child.
Right.
And the little girl, she's a little doll. And I followed this young lady. And I think that was a major part of her healing. And it will allow her to move forward and to grow. As the little girl grows and she's able to open herself up to more and greater aspects of her life.
In somewhat different vein, but I think similar concept, that reminds me of people who maybe wanted to go on a trip, or their loved one wanted to go visit a certain place, and they take their ashes and spread them there.
Sure.
Or things like, to a certain extent, I think, as far as like trying to fulfill those things together. Does that make sense? I think
absolutely.
Different vein, but similar concept, I think.
Absolutely.
You know what you said a minute ago about as far as living your life in such a way to open yourself up to
positive events in your life.
Right. The sort of, I guess you could say maybe the call of God, or what. I heard Dr. Tony Evans, pastor at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, say one time that God's direction for your life can be like a GPS. The GPS doesn't force you to go anywhere. You can go wherever you want to. That doesn't mean it's not pointing you to, if you follow the GPS, you're going to end up at a destination. You don't have to follow the GPS. You can go wherever you want.
That's right.
And sometimes you might not go the path of least resistance. And what does the GPS say? It says recalculating, and it comes up with a new path. So just because you didn't take the path of least resistance doesn't mean you're not going to end up at the same final destination.
Yeah. And I swear there's one GPS program you can download that when I turn a direction other than the one she wants me to take, I swear it sounds like she's yelling at me, I told you to turn left.
Probably. Is it the British lady? They're always British. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I thought that was, if you think of life, if that is sort of how your theology and spirituality works, I think that's an interesting illustration in the sense that there might be a direction that you can go to a place that is most fulfilling to you. If you want to say that's your call, it's the place maybe where you find the most peace and fulfillment in life. But you can go wherever you want to go.
That's right.
There's no, it's not, there aren't any bumper lanes on the bowling alley, Right. You can go wherever. There's nothing to force you to go down this path. It just might be where you find the most peace.
And learn from your experiences and mistakes and try not to repeat them.
Yeah.
It's like the couple of whom I'm aware, they came to a minister. They didn't know this person. Came to him and said, we've been to every minister in town. We want to get married. When we tell them, I've been married 4 times, she's been married 3, they won't touch us. They won't deal with us. What should we do? What can we do? He said, counseling. Let me say it again. Counseling.
Yes. Slow down would be
Third
my first.
time, counseling. Find out what went wrong in your previous relationships. Are you selecting the same kind of partner? Are you, for example, not saying this couple did it, are you identifying people who may be alcoholic and you think you can change them or save them?
Are you a fixer?
Are you a fixer?
Don't be a fixer.
That doesn't work.
No. No disrespect to the people who think they are fixers. I've been at that point in my life. You may have too. I think lots of people go through that phase. And hopefully at some point you realize you cannot save the world, and all you're going to do is kill yourself trying.
Yeah. And, but, look at how you can adjust your thinking of yourself and the world around you. What do you and your partner need to do to create the healthiest relationship together you can do? And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. But you have learned that between 7 marriages combined, whatever you've been doing ain't working.
Yeah, you've learned what doesn't work.
So quantify that, identify that, and avoid it.
When something I sort of jokingly say to people is learn from your mistakes, but try to learn from other people's too.
Well, and that's hard to do.
If you learn from somebody else's, you don't have to make that one. You can make a different one.
That's right.
You will make some.
Yeah.
But try not to make the same one.
It is hard to extrapolate from the mistakes of other people to my own behaviors. Although we learn, hopefully, as little babies, first of all, we have to learn what the word hot means. And we can only do that by experience. So at one point, we have to burn ourselves.
Yes.
But after that, mama or daddy can go, hot, don't touch. And you go, oh, I know what hot is, and that's not fun. I'm not going to touch that.
I'm not going to mess with that.
And when we get older, we forget that we kind of learn that same way all through our lives. Or we need to learn. And we don't always.